Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin. He's Gordon. FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com is our email address. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and on our website, FloTrack.org/FloTrack podcasts. Gordon, another day of real but also hypothetical cross-country rankings.
You just did that intro at like 1.5 speed.
Mm-hmm.
You were quick doing that intro. What do you got to go? What's going on?
Oh, nowhere. I just want to get to the rankings. I listened to you and Lincoln do the pod yesterday. He clearly didn't listen to our pod because he's like, explain how you did the rankings. It's like, we did that the other day. Lincoln, listen to the actual podcast that you're a part of. You guys argued about a runner in the top 10 that I had literally never heard of. And I thought that was great. That was great content. I actually thought you made some good points. I was on your side on that one. I think I was on Lincoln's side in terms of the order of the NC State runners, though. So score one, another one for Lincoln. But overall, I'll give you the decision because, again, you actually listened to the podcast that you do. You were on the podcast that you did. Yeah. So that's bonus points for you. But we're talking men's teams today. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Getting ready to go. This NCAA Championship is looking like it's going to be a great one, right? What are your thoughts? It's going to be a great championship that happens in our minds.
Yeah, I was doing the same thing yesterday that I did during the pod, and you guys caught yourself doing it too, where you're talking about, man, but NC State, they're relying on a lot of freshmen. Are they going to be able to pull it off? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. And what's weird is you could have everybody come back, be it in the spring or be it next fall, and you could have the identical setup in terms of just personnel people. It's not going to happen because some people are going to go pro, some people aren't going to run anymore, whatever. But what you definitely can't recreate is the feeling of being in college for the first time and having to compete in that first semester. And with so many marquee freshmen this year, that's definitely a storyline that's going to be lost whenever the championship is. Even if it's just in the spring, it's a whole different ballgame than your first semester being in college and competing.
Yeah, I agree. It's like weird. They'll still be freshmen, but they'll be redshirt freshmen, and it's just like, And technically, they wouldn't be called redshirt freshmen because this year off is not considered a redshirt year. It's just considered they'll be COVID freshmen. There'll be a new type of you have redshirt freshman, and COVID freshmen. That's what we'll have. We'll have you'll end up having the 7th year COVID senior. End up being like. So you want to dive into these COVID shirt, yeah. You want to dive into these rankings, man?
Yeah, let's do it. Again, these are done by you and you alone. So any problems that people have with them should send you an email. I'll release your email address at the end of the show along with your cell phone number so that way people can get in touch. But we'll go 25 down to 1. Now, tomorrow we do the women's. It's going to be me and Lincoln. So we're both going to be talking about rankings that we didn't do. So that'll be a fun one. But I've seen
Lincoln's just going to – you're just going to dunk on them. That's what's going to happen. He's just going to be like, oh, this is stupid. This is wrong. This is wrong.
Let's call up Gordon. Let's get his take. I looked at them. There's not much to object to in the women's rankings. I'll just say that. But we'll do men's today. Men's at 25 down to 21. We'll start with this group. So coming into that 25 slot, Villanova, then Alabama 24, Texas 23, Furman 22, and Indiana 21.
So basically Texas, Alabama, and Villanova, they're all ranked in the same area where they finished last year. Texas was 25th, Alabama was 24th, Nova was 23rd. So we kind of just flip-flop them a bit. Indiana and Furman kind of drop a bit. That's mainly because they lose a lot of their star, not star, but better runners, so they're not as deep, so they had to kind of drop down a bit. But one team I'm interested in is Alabama. They're 24th. They're going to have a redshirt freshman coming in named Iliad Kipsang, who I have projected finishing 26th overall. He was supposed to run last year with the Kiprop and Keegan duo, and they would have a great trio, but eligibility got in the way of, I'm not sure what it was, but he wasn't able to compete, so he had a redshirt all year long. But apparently, according to the coach, he was training up with Kiprop and Keegan all season long. So if he's basically at the level of what Kiprop and Keegan were, that's good news for them because that means they have another young guy who can come in and kind of be the workhorse for the next 3 to 4 years.
I have one question on Texas. Kieran Tuntavate, does he have cross eligibility or is he just using outdoor? Okay, so he is not factored in here. Okay.
Yeah, for Texas, the roster I have Worley coming back. I mean, most likely Worley's not going to run, though. Even no one's running, but because Worley's still coming off the injury. But in a world where not only there's a season, but Worley is healthy, I had Worley in there. Graydon Morris, who's a good freshman coming in, and then Creighton Carosa, who I think ran sub-4 as a freshman last year. So that'll be like their top 3. They still don't have like another like strong distance guy like an Alex Rogers or John Rice. So they're still relying purely on Milers and Worley and Carosa. But hey, you can get top 25 here.
Mm-hmm. Worley ran great last year in cross.
Yeah.
And then had that unfortunate injury during the meet in the indoor season, but he'll have more time to recover now. Let's go into the top 20, starting with number 20, Oklahoma State. They would host this hypothetical meet at 20. They didn't make the meet in 2019. Wisconsin at 19, Harvard 18, Ole Miss 17, and Purdue in 16th.
Yeah, so Oklahoma State obviously did not make the meet, mainly because Isai Rodriguez was injured. Now their team, I mean, coach is confident on their team, but they don't really have many guys who have really proven themselves outside of Isai. I mean, they're really only having to score 4 because we know Isai is going to be a top 5 guy. But a lot of their roster is just younger people or people who are unproven. Like they're going to have 2 freshmen, Ryan Schaap and Jonas Price. So we'll see what they do. But like Bryce Quigley, Alec Haynes, none of them have really done much. I mean, they qualified for the meet 2 years ago, but they all finished like in the 200s or 150s, whatever. So I don't know. I put them in there mainly because they're hosting the meet that doesn't exist. And if you're hosting the meet, you're going to get your team in there. And if you have a stick as low as Isai, you should be able to be top 20. That's why they got there.
Okay. So they get the boost for having the meet at home, even though there is no meet.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And also, here's the thing. We're going through these 25 through 16. There is no order that will ever be correct because it literally doesn't matter. Like, the only order that like actually proves like better to worse is like 1 through maybe 7 or 8. But like not like you could argue like 9 to 15 is just like the second tier, and then there's everyone else. Everyone who finishes in the 16 to 31 range, it's just you're throwing a bunch of names in a bag, shaking it up, and pulling it out. It's not like the 16th team and the 17th team. The difference between them is literally nothing. It's just luck. It's just they're the same team. So that's why it's kind of fun weird to rank these third tier teams because it's like there really is no reason to rhyme. It's just like kind of luck. It's shaking it up. I don't know. Do you see any
and then you take
thoughts on these teams?
Well, I see your point though, because then if you do throw into that equation someone like Rodriguez, who you know can get top 5, then that's enough because a lot of these other teams don't have. Okay, they for sure are going to have somebody in the top 5, which would separate them. Doesn't matter if they haven't figured out the next 4. At least they have that one, and then they can build around that and get a low enough team score. No, I see it. I mean, just some of these teams, they could end up not making the meet, and then some of them can finish 10th. There's a huge variability there between. I think you could extend it even out into, if you ranked all the way into the 30s and 40s, you could say, well, some of these teams that are 40th ranked could end up getting on going to this hypothetical meet. Now, the chance of a team preseason ranked 40 getting on the podium, that's an entirely different story. But getting in the meet, you could do it.
And if you're in the meet, every team can finish 16th. It's just luck. I think 16th to 31 is just shake it up and throw it in the bag because the difference between someone who go on that day and run and finish 70th to 140th, It's not really much different because it's all like, I mean, you see like amazing runners finish 140th and then average runners finish 70th. And you're like, what's the difference? Oh, one just had a good day. The conditions kind of messed it up, the footing, so it's kind of weird. Like the order of the second half of teams is kind of really arbitrary all year long. Even when it happens, you're like, oh, all right, okay, cool. You really only care about who finishes top 4 or even top 10 in a way. So, not to
me,
like
man.
shit on.
I'm a 1 through 31 type of guy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was like, why we even do a top 25? Like, there really is no reason to rank anyone outside the top 10 because it's like, rankings should just be pick who you think will be the 10 best teams and then order them. And then every week you decide to remove someone from the top 10. But like going from 19th to 17th in a weekly ranking is just like stupid. It's like, it means nothing. Let's be honest. Wow. Sorry, I don't mean to go on this mini rant. This is what I just
author of the rankings.
I just learned this because like I've been doing these ranking stuff now for like 4 or 5 years, and you just notice that like it really doesn't matter, man. Like it's just like it is just shake it up and shuffle up and deal, right? I mean the way I order these all the teams, I mean, is a lot of times I come up with the individual ranking from like 1 all the way to 255. And a lot of times I score it with just like, I score it with only your top 3, I score it with your top 4, and I score it with your top 5, right? And so I kind of see like the depth, right? So because a lot of times my place that I put your 4 or 5 man is really kind of arbitrary, right? Because I can't really pinpoint where your 4 or 5 man are finished, but your top 3 are a lot more kind of known commodities. So a lot of times I kind of sort it like, okay, here's where the best groups of 3 are, here's where the best groups of 4 are, and here are the best groups of 5 runners, and I kind of use that as my gauging to kind of get groups. Like, all right, these are podium contenders, these are top 10 teams, these are the teens, and then this is everyone else. So long-winded way to talk about the 20th to 16th ranked teams.
Yeah, but it's true. There's so many people who cross the line within 10 seconds of each other in this meet that it can skew the results dramatically if someone's off by just a little bit. And now let's jump into that top 15. You have Washington, the Huskies at 15th. They were 19th last year. NC State, you have them moving up from 26th to 14th. Syracuse moving up from 27th to 13th. Michigan, they were 7th last year. You have them in 12th. And Iona, they were 12th last year. You have them 11th. So you have some big movers here in Syracuse and NC State, Gordon.
Yeah, NC State's a mover mainly because they just had a bad day, I think, last year. Like Joe Brissett and Edwin Rudo, they were a lot better in 2018. I have them scoring higher here in 2019. On Syracuse end, they add in, I think he's from William Mary, JP Trojan, who's like a top 60 type guy or top 40 type guy. Joe Dragon had a good track season. He's one of their top 3 guys. So I think a lot of, and then, Aiden Tooker, he didn't run well last year or even at all. I'm not sure if he ran at all last year. Maybe he did, but he was better in 2018 than he was in 2019. So a lot of the Syracuse and NC State moving up is mainly because they just had bad days last year, but they still return a bunch of guys that should hopefully bump them in the teens, So that's for that. Washington, hey man, there used to be a time when we're like, Washington, watch out, podium threat after they finished 7th in the first year under Andy Powell. But after last year when we thought they had a good team, now look at the team again this year. It's kind of like, it looks like Andy is going back to the Oregon days where it's like, hey, we're a mid-distance school. We're going to have some great milers, some great 3K runners. And he is getting some great milers. I mean, look at his recruiting and some of the results that the milers have done on the track. So I just don't believe in the Washington cross-country program yet.
Going back to Syracuse for a second, they may only be ranked 13th, but in terms of the name championship with JP Trojan and Joe Dragon as your two low sticks for best names in the NCAA, you're on the podium. You're on the podium, Syracuse. Yeah, Washington. We thought Washington was going to redshirt people last year to prep for this year, which in retrospect, a good decision that they probably didn't do that. But they didn't end up doing that, but they still didn't run well at the end of the season. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I mean, they had some good distance guys there. I mean, they had Jordan, they had Thibodeau Proctor active last year running. It just didn't materialize. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's a shift in priorities, and they're certainly bringing in some great high school runners who are milers.
Yeah, I mean, like Sam Tanner. I mean, he's a great miler, but he's not really good in the cross. And then Leo Doshbach and Cruz Culpepper, the two incoming freshmen. You don't expect them to be Nico Young type talents coming in. Even though Doshbach broke 4, he's looked at very differently than someone who can run like a sub 14 5K. So
yeah.
Also, speaking of name,
who do you have
name champions in Syracuse, they also have a what's that?
For Washington, who do you have as their projected top 5? I'm just curious.
So
they're
I have
non-actual projection.
Yeah. Tibio, is it Tibio or Thibault? Thibodeau Proctor.
I think the coach calls him Tibbs.
Tibbs Proctor. I have him finishing 40th. Jack Rowe. Okay, this is like 40th among teams that are scoring, right? I have him scoring 40 points. Jack Rowe, a senior. Talon Hall. Alex Slenning, Isaac Green, and then Leo Doshbach, and then Cruz.
I mean, without that, that top 3 could be good. Like Proctor finished. I mean, has the potential for much higher. Rowe has the potential for much higher, and then Talon Hall has put out some good performances in his career too. So that could be a better team, or could have been a better team than what's listed here.
Yeah, but I still think their ceiling is like 10th or 8th or something like that.
Sure.
I don't see them really creeping into the top 6. So, But yeah.
Shall we move into the top 10?
Yeah, and then what else? We also Michigan was 7th last year. I have them 12th this year. I mean, I feel like their 7th place was kind of like fluke in a way. I don't know why. It just felt that way. But they returned a couple guys from that team. But what were you gonna say?
I think the reason, I don't think fluke is the right word, but they were a very unheralded squad because they were a team who had this insanely small 1 through 5 gap, and I think sometimes we don't recognize if a team doesn't have an individual within that individual race, or even an individual that's like a top 15 runner, or even like, hey, this person could win the Big Ten championship. They may not be a factor for an NCAA title, but they had a lot of guys who were not high profile, but their pack was just so tight. So they were a solid team 1 through 5 there when it came to Terre Haute. So, I mean, if they continue to kind of run that sort of model back of not having a superstar, but having just that balance, I think we could see it. We could see that sort of thing happen again. Now that's tough if you're trying to get on the podium, but getting in the top 10, it's just, it's those teams fly under the radar all the time because you don't have a name or 2 names attached to them.
Check this out. The Michigan squad, speaking of name game, and their top, Devin Meyer is the number 1 guy, but they're 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. They all start with the letter J, but here, check out these names. You have Jacob Branch, Jacob Lee, Jack Aho, and Juiced Plantink. Plantink? His name is Juiced. Joost.
Yeah.
And then Iona, actually, I think is also a sneakily good team. I have them ranked 11th. They finished 12th last year. But Iona every year has like, maybe it's Iona's year. I remember before I worked at Flo, they had like one year where they had like a bunch of individuals that are good. I mean, what's like the Mitch Goose years? Remember those years? But John Jack Millar, who was good last year, he was a international transfer junior, and now he's a senior. But they have Jack O'Leary, Ihab Illa, El Sandali. So they have a good 1, 2, 3. Like their 1, 2, 3, I have them all ranked in the top 40. So they're potentially gonna have 3 All-Americans. And then if they can find 2 other guys, I think they can. I mean, Jamie D, who's like a younger brother from Liam D, who was pretty good a few years ago. And then Jack Hopkins or Ed Goddard, who both guys, maybe if they put together a good race, they can get up there. But Iona, I think, is a sneakily good team as well, even though I have them ranked 11th here.
Mm-hmm. Let's go 10 to 6 here. Stanford at 10. You have Colorado at 9, Oregon at 8, Tulsa at 7, and Portland at 6. So some traditional powers mixed in there with the upstart from Tulsa.
Yeah, Colorado got in there to 9th. I wanted to rank them lower, to be honest. I mean, like worse, but I just couldn't because it's Colorado, and they finished 3rd last year. But they do lose pretty low stick in Joe Klecker. And if you look at the Colorado teams returning, I mean, this is their returning squad is Alec Hornecker, who did have a good race, give him credit, but he's not like the star that like a Klecker was. And then Eduardo Herrera, who's kind of just a solid top 50 guy. They have the Mississippi State transfer, Stephen Jones, and then a bunch of younger guys like Kayshawn Harrison, Jace Ashbrenner. But they don't really have like a name brand up front. So that's why they're kind of dropped down to the bottom half of the top 10.
Remember Kayshawn Harrison, how good he was all year. He did not have a great race at NCAA. So I think he could be a potential top 25 guy for sure.
Yeah.
If you want to just, there's got to be a name for people who like were good all year, but then didn't have a good championship. But because it's cross country, we put everything on the championship and we forget all about. It's not like track where you can say. It's not like track where you can say, oh, you know, she ran 4:10 in the 1500. She had a bad race in NCAAs, but she at least left that season with like a great PR 4:10. What are you going to say for like cross country? Yeah, they got 18th at Nuttycombe, but you know, like, you don't have anything to hang your hat on in cross if you don't run well in the big race. So Harrison was one of those guys. I think he could be better than his ranking. I don't know what you have him in his ranking, but I think he could be better. Maybe that would pull Colorado up a bit. But I agree, it's hard to fill the shoes that were left by those seniors.
Yeah, and then Tulsa. They're kind of an interesting one. I didn't know they actually would be ranked higher if I knew about the eligibility status of one of their runners. That's why it kind of sometimes it's hard to make these rankings because you're not sure about some of the runners. So like Cameron Field, he's listed as a senior last year, but a lot of times these international people are seniors for like 2 to 3 years, right? So I didn't know if he's part of that group, if he's going to be a returner, because if he was, he'd be the number 3 guy, and that bumps them up massively. I mean, they probably would be like 100 points better if you add him into the lineup. So that would bump Tulsa maybe potentially into podium contention if Cameron Field returns. Oregon, also kind of an interesting one. I didn't know if James West was going to return. He's also like a 30-year senior, right? He's more of a miler, and he kind of has like a weird situation where like now that there's no really like Pac-12 cross country, like he's like in a weird situation. Like what does Oregon have for me now, right? Like if there's no NCAA competition, I should maybe stay over in Europe and try to get a pro contract, because he's like a guy who could get a pro contract trying to qualify for the Olympics at the British trials. So James West and Cameron Field are 2 people I wasn't sure whether or not to add to the team. And if you add James West to Oregon's squad, that makes them a much better, behind Cooper Tier and Jackson Messler.
Mm-hmm. And then you had Portland at 6. They were 10th last year. They're always there. What would their top 5 have looked like?
So Portland, their entire top 4 is all based off of newcomers or athletes who had a great track season. So their number 1 stick would be Stan Neaston, who is a newcomer who is like a 13:40 5K runner. Then you have Everett Silva, who ran a good 5K indoors. He ran 13:47 indoors. Then you have Jacob Clems, who's a transfer from a D2 program, who ran 13:52. Then you have Matt Strangio, who's that true freshman who almost broke 4 on his own in the middle of a pandemic. And then you have the rest of their typical squad. You have Riley Osen, Ruben Kiprono. But yeah, they're kind of ranked high because off the backs of Neeston, Silva, Clems, and Strangio. So it's kind of a new look Portland team based off of these 3 newcomers of Neeston, Clems, and Strangio. So,
okay.
And that's not even including, there's another guy who was a freshman last year. Oh, what's his name? This is killing me. Find it.
Rob Connor's listening. Make sure you figure out. Hurry up. Hurry up. He's going to turn it off. He's going to turn it off.
His name is Justin Hazel. Justin Hazel is also an interesting wild card potential. I mean, he ran a sub 8 3K. He ran 7:59 last year as a freshman. Yeah, so Justin Hazel. He's also in the other person to keep an eye on. So okay. Portland, I think, is going to be good. Done are the days of counting out Portland. Done. No more. FloTrack will never count out Portland in the history of the time that me and Lincoln are still here. So
who's counted out Portland? You guys counted out Portland before?
Well, a couple times Lincoln has said some side comments of like, oh, Portland, they're really good at getting 7th because they got like 7th 2 years in a row. And then that year they made the he said it like three or 4 years ago. And then after that moment, that's when Portland went on like their mini run of like making a bunch of podiums. You know, that's when they got podium with just 5 guys. And then the next year or 2 years later, they got 2nd. And then the next year they got 3rd. It was Lincoln, man, sparking that plug, you know, like with telling undervaluing Portland. But now I see the value, man. They got some good transfers coming in. The D2 kid, the international kid, and then a good true freshman. That's a good 3 to bring in to a team that finished 10th last year.
Mm-hmm. Let's go into the top 5. We'll do these one by one. Number 5, Iowa State, who would be led, hypothetically, by that JUCO transfer Wesley Bangura, who you had ranked 6. So you have Iowa State staying in the top 5. They were 4th last year. Of course, they were buoyed by Edwin Kurgat's individual title, and he's no longer there. So Bangura goes in there, and at most he scores 5 more points than Kurgat. So that's not a bad swap if he runs to his ranking.
Oh yeah, and then they have Chad Johnson, Mitchell Day, Milo Greeter, and Thomas Pollard, David Tu as well, who had a bad race, but should be back and is better than. I mean, David Tu was like the late transfer last year. Didn't really put together, but David Tu could be a top 50 guy. I mean, he finished in the hundreds last year, but I think he'll probably be a top 50 guy. But yeah, it's all. I mean, they finished in the podium. They broke that barrier of being a podium team after years of feeling they had the bodies and just. After Andrew Jordan, it's kind of crazy. The year they podium is the year like one of their top guys transfers away with Andrew Jordan. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I think Wesley Bangura is going to be a big difference maker. And I think he slides in to replace what Kurgat left. And I think they're going to be pretty good.
You just talked about Iowa State for about a minute without mentioning your favorite runner in NCAA history. Was that hard?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, he is back. You know what? I've given up on.
I don't know if he is. He may not be, but you still should mention him.
I think he is. Festus Legat, my favorite NCAA runner of this era. Every year I think he's gonna be a wild card top 40 guy.
He's gonna win the 800 and he's gonna win cross country. He's gonna be the first person ever to do that double.
Didn't Lopez Lamong almost do that? Did Lopez win the 8 and the cross?
You're right.
Yeah, because we were talking about this with Danny Jones, right? That was like a thing with the 800 and cross. But anyway, I was going to say, Festus is a guy. I think he might return. He might have eligibility, and if he does, watch out. That's all I got to say.
I mean, he was good on the he was good in outdoor, right? In 2018. Am I remembering that correctly, or is that wrong?
I think he was. I think he got 3rd in the behind Hoppel and what's his name? Oh my gosh,
Dixon.
I keep on forgetting people. Dixon, yeah, I could be wrong, but he was good.
Yeah,
Iowa State going from 4th to 5th.
So Lamong in 07, he was 5th at USA's in the 800. He won the 1500, and then that's the year he got 3rd in cross later on that fall. So nobody's to my knowledge, nobody's done it until now when Festus got. Well, he's got to win both of them. He hasn't won either of them yet, but he's going to win both of them in a year where there's no season. This is it.
Well, hey, this might help him because if the competition is only people from the ACC and SEC, hey, this is your chance to shine. You don't have to go up against NAU and BYU.
Yeah. Number 4, Notre Dame. Go.
I love this. This pod has been like, Gordon, talk about all the work you've done. Notre Dame, they finished 8th last year. I do think they underperformed based on what they finished, and I think they're still a young team, and I think this is the year that they podium, and maybe even next year they could challenge to win. But that's assuming they have a good year this year. Again, a good year this year and a year that isn't happening. Yair Nuguse, like if I was them, like they like in a regular year, like imagine there's no pandemic, great time. If they would decide to redshirt Nuguse and then go all in 1 year later, they would have a really good team in 2021 because you have Nuguse, you have Dylan Jacobs, who's a sophomore, Danny Kilray, who's a junior, and then you have like the freshman, Jake Renfree, Josh Methner. That would be a really strong team, I think. But it's all based off of Nuguse. We have him improving drastically. I think he's going to be – he was like a 45th place finisher. I think he's a top 20 guy now. And then you have these younger guys who they were bigger names in high school, and they kind of hidden in the Notre Dame landscape, haven't really broken out at the NCAA level yet. But Dylan Jacobs and Danny Kilray and Jake Renfree, I think, are 3 guys who should be a good trio to be behind Nuguse to be a podium team.
Yeah, Methner didn't get a lot of, a senior this year in high school, would be a true freshman this fall. A lot of the headlines went to Nico Young, and rightfully so. He was good, but Methner won Foot Locker when Nico Young wasn't there. I mean, he's really good. He's got star potential too. Number 3, moving up, 27 spots, the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yes. See, Arkansas is a team that the coaches were going to sleep on, and this would piss me off because the coaches would probably rank Arkansas like 26th, right, in the preseason, not knowing that like you're ranking a top 4 team 26th. But they are good. They're so good they could win. I know NAU and BYU are the heavy favorites, but if they have a great day, I 100% think they could win. And a majority of their team are going to be Kenyans, and if the meet is in Oklahoma State, it's not going to be that cold weather like Indiana chilly rain that a lot of times these East African athletes struggle in. They're going to be completely in their element. I mean, they're going to be training in Arkansas hot weather and then running their championship in Oklahoma. It's going to be fine for them. Now, if they do get their team a mulligan and all come back for next year, where it'll be in Tallahassee, that also is going to help Arkansas because basically this is the time for Arkansas, either this year or next year, to
win.
To win, to pounce when the fire's hot.
To
right?
win.
So here's a team. So they bring in Jacob McLeod from Belmont, who's now a junior at Arkansas. Matt Young, who's now a senior, who ran 13:49. They bring in Andrew Cabet, who is a junior college transfer who won JUCOs 2 years ago and then kind of transferred into more of a mid-distance and has won everything at the mid-distance level at the JUCO level. You could argue Cabet is the second best. He is the second best. He's the second best JUCO guy coming in behind Bangura, and he's going to be one of their top 5 guys. You have Gilbert Boyd, who redshirted last year, who's a 1344 guy. You have Emmanuel Chebason, who is a transfer from Louisville, who is a 1341 guy, and was running well for Louisville, finishing the top teens at a bunch of meets at the like pre-nats level and all that stuff, but because he was on a bad team, he never went to NCAAs. And then you have Amoin Kemboy, who is a transfer from Campbell, who we have as the second best runner in the NCAA. So you have Kemboy from Campbell, Chebason from Louisville, Boyd, who is a redshirt returner, Kibet from junior college, Matt Young, who had a breakout track year this year in 2020 where he ran 13:49. Then you have McLeod, the transfer from Belmont. Those are 6 guys. Like, that's enough. Like, and then you Ryan Murphy, who's actually a solid guy, who could be in their top 7. They're good. Again, they're all transfers, but they're good. I have them finishing scoring wise 2 points, 25, 31, 35, 44. So I have their 2 through 5 all kind of between the 25 and 45 range.
Okay. Balanced attack there.
Yeah.
So what's the gap from them to BYU and NAU right now?
So I have them scoring 137 points. I have the second best team scoring 115.
Oh, so not far behind at all.
Yeah, not far
20-point margin.
Okay.
Yeah, but you see
Arkansas, BYU, and NAU are a group. They're like big separation from Notre Dame, Iowa State, Portland, and all the other teams.
Okay.
It's like a tri-meet. It's those 3 teams.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the top 2 then. I think everybody knows where we're going with this. BYU 2, NAU 1. What I want to know is, how did you separate those 2? What was the deciding factor between putting the defending champs number 2?
I mean, it's mainly NAU's squad. Again, these rankings are all based off of limited data, right? Last year, the year before, and indoor. And NAU had such a good indoor season. It made a lot of their 2019 cross-country performances get scratched out and bumped up for their 2020 5K performances. Let me screenshot something. Give me 2 seconds.
I can't see your screenshots, unfortunately. Sorry, Gordon.
I know. Well, I'm doing it for myself. Okay. So, let me bring this up. Come on. So let's just do like a side-by-side comparison. So let's start with their number 1 sticks. Obviously, BYU has Connor Mance. We have him winning. And then NAU has Louis Grijalva. So you would argue advantage BYU, but it's a slight advantage, assuming Grijalva can show up and run a fast race, right?
Yes, that's important. It's important that he shows up, number 1, and runs a fast race, number 2. There's 2 steps to that, yeah.
So it's a double advantage for BYU. And then in the second tier, which I have as Blaze Farrow, but you could argue it's anybody. It could be Abdi Hamid Nur, one of Blaze, Abdi Hamid Nur, Nico Young, or Drew Bosley. One of those guys versus Casey Klinger. Now, Casey Klinger, he was good. I mean, he was a top 25 guy as a true freshman 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. I would still give advantage BYU there. I think Casey Klinger will be – I think they're – like, I could see them putting their top 2 in front of NAU's 1, maybe even.
Yeah.
So I would say heavy advantage BYU on the top 2.
Okay.
And then this is where NAU gets this is where NAU gets the advantage. 3, 4, 5 is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is advantage NAU. Right now, 6, 7 doesn't really matter as much. It's more insurance, but 3, 4, 5 is heavy advantage NAU. And the reason why is because BYU loses Heslington, right? And their next guys are Brandon Garnica, Clayson Shumway, who was a redshirt, and Matt Owens. I have them finishing points-wise 33, 36, 38. Whereas for NAU's 3, 4, 5, I have them finishing points-wise 12, 15, 17. So that's a big difference.
There's going to be some low scores at this meet.
Yeah.
Those are some low scoring fourth runners. The issue I have with this, and I know you don't want to just take one meet, but the issue I have with this is you look at the title team last year, and you have Mance leading the way, and he's back, and he's reliable, and you think he's going to finish in the top 5. You lose Heslington and Carney, but you replace those runners with Shumway and Casey Klinger, which is not much of a drop off, if at all. In many ways, you could say it might be an upgrade. And then 4 and 5 are still there with Garnica and Owens. So there's really not much changing in the top 5. However, NAU doesn't really change anything in their top 5. Yeah, they lose Jordy Beamish from this team, but you have Nico Young entering the fray, and you also just you could use Ryan Raff in your top 5, and he's an NCAA qualifier in the 5,000. So there's not much of a drop off. I would, if I was doing the rankings, and I'm not, I mean, you could almost argue pure toss up here. I know you like to do that. You like to say, oh, these two teams are tied, but you just do that for clicks. I would almost honestly do it here and say this thing is a complete toss up, which is just yet another reason why I'm so bummed out that this is not going to happen this season.
But here's the thing. I like what you said, that they kind of are almost a replica of their teams from last year, with Klinger and Shumway replacing Carney and Heslington, and then Nico Young replacing Jordy Beamish, right? So there's not much turnover. But here's the thing. If that's true, NAU going into that meet was heavy favorite. They were like one of the bigger favorites that we've ever had, right? Now they ended up losing, and BYU had a major upset, but it was an upset. Like, we can't forget that it was an upset. And if typically upsets don't happen multiple times, right? Typically, not to say that BYU is a 16th seed, but typically the 16th seed in the NCAA tournament doesn't upset the 8th seed in the second round, right? They upset the 1 seed and then they're done, right? Or whatever.
That's only happened once, but yes.
You know what I mean? But if they are the same teams of last year, wouldn't it make sense that the odds of an upset happening back-to-back years are a lot more rarer than the favorite team to win this time around?
Yeah, you're saying reversion to the mean, but I'm saying in cross country we have such a small sample size to go off of. Yes, NAU was the favorite, but does that even really matter? With track, I feel like there's more upsets because you have PRs coming in, you have times coming in. NAU, in retrospect, probably should not have been as big of a favorite, but you're right, because they had some big name guys not perform well on that day. So yes, I understand. I see your argument. If you're running it back, the odds are going to balance out and NAU gets the dub. Because if you're just talking about pure, okay, let's look at their 5K potential, and you're going to have Abdi Hamid Nur versus BYU's 4 and 5. Well, Abdi Hamid Nur is probably going to match up better, or Drew Bosley or Nico Young, just how talented those guys are. But they turned it in on the day. Because look, if BYU just had an average day and they didn't win, that would have meant that Garnica and Owens would have been, well outside All-American spot, right? They'd have been like a 60 or 70 or something like that, correct?
Yeah.
So then we would be sitting here saying BYU's got a good 3, but they got huge question marks at 4 and 5. Instead, we're saying, oh no, they have now 2 proven guys in the 4 and the 5 slot because we saw them do it last year. And that makes all the difference in the world. And that's persuasive to me. Maybe it's too persuasive. Maybe it's putting too much emphasis on one race, but that's just the way I thought about it in my head.
In this imaginary race, it's not happening.
I think about a lot of things in my head that aren't going to happen. Yes.
I caught myself again thinking about, who do you think is going to win this? And then I realized, we're not going to see it. So
here's the good thing, though. I mean, this is not good, but 2020 terms, maybe it is good. these teams should pretty much stay the same for next year, right? Assuming that they don't do it in the spring and they do this in the fall. Like, who's going to leave? I don't think anybody's going pro out of these groups. And then
Grijalva's the only one that may leave.
Yeah, I don't.
But I guess he could. He's a true senior, so I guess he would be coming back. Blaze Farrow would be. He's a fifth year. So Farrow's a fifth year. So he could potentially leave. But if Farrow leaves, I mean, whatever. Ryan Raff, Brody Hasty, Theo Quacks, they're fine.
It's not instrumental to this matchup. Like the key players aren't gonna, like, Klinger's only gonna be better with another year. Nico Young is probably only gonna be better with another year. If anything, this thing gets better because we're waiting. I mean, it's good. It's looking good now, so I would definitely take it now because there's nothing guaranteed and people could get hurt. But right now, this just is such a compelling matchup, and now it is a rivalry. They did get a victory over NAU, so it just as it's hitting its peak, it's hitting its apex right now. So it sucks we have to wait a year, but I think all the big players will be there next year.
Yeah, but like you said when you talked about NC State before this pod, watching Nico Young run next year won't feel the same as watching him run this year. Right?
Yeah. But for NC State, that's different because that was like the storyline of like the Fab Five freshmen. Like, how are they going to do? Nico Young is just one person in this, and I'm sure BYU has some stud freshmen too that they're going to have, potentially trying to get in their top 7. He can be a year later, and the matchup is still interesting. This isn't about people. Like, this isn't about individual people. It's about two programs, the way I see it. And right now, the programs are so evenly matched that it's going to make it very fun. And someone like Grijalva, I mean, how do you get more motivated than Grijalva probably is right now?
Yeah. I mean, especially when he was trying to like redeem himself, and then COVID just like said, nope, not today, son. You can't redeem yourself yet. He's going to have to keep waiting. I mean,
no, he was itching to race. Like, right after Meek got called, we were down there doing interviews and stuff. He's like, let's get a race. Let's go. Let's do it. Like, he wanted it right then. And then, and then they channeled some of that to that mile in the dome, which you said converted to something like a 3:45 mile, I believe is what the story is now. And it gets faster
every year. Yeah. So we did. Oh, what?
No, you were going to do your hypothetical meet now, taking out the conferences that aren't competing, correct? Go ahead.
Yeah, so if we take out the conferences not competing, this fake championship that we might get, you have number 3, Arkansas, 4, Notre Dame, 5, Iowa State, 7, Tulsa, 13, Syracuse, 14, NC State, 17, Ole Miss, 20, OK State, 23 and 24, Texas and Alabama. So who wins? I mean, obviously Arkansas, Notre Dame, and Iowa State are the cream of the crop. Do you think it ends in that order? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you sold me on Arkansas for sure, and the fact that there is that gap between them and that next tier, I think, is notable. So I would roll with Arkansas. Notre Dame, though, very, very intriguing. Tulsa, obviously, the balance you got to like, especially if they have as many people back as you think would be back. But Arkansas, I think Arkansas would do well on both the men's and women's, minus the remaining big 3 champ, whatever we would call this meet. Well, you called it something yesterday with Lincoln, and he made a joke about it. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being like, when we take out all the non-SEC, Big 12, and ACC schools, on the men's side, you still get 3 up from the top 5 and 4 from the top 7. Whereas on the women's side, you only get 1 from the top 5, and it's NC State, right? So, like, the men's race in this situation would be a little more, would be entertaining to watch. An Arkansas, Notre Dame, Iowa State battle would be more entertaining to watch than NC State and then like weekend Arkansas women's team and like a Florida State team, right? Because women, you really want to see a Stanford, New Mexico, a Colorado, a Michigan State, BYU. So, at least if we do get this fake meet in November, the men's team battle will be something interesting to watch.
Well, I think if they when they do it next fall, knock on wood. I think Arkansas is going to be in good shape too, because it's probably nice to have an extra year to get them situated within the program, because you're saying how many of their guys are coming in as transfers from other schools. I think advantage them. It would be very on brand for cross country if we're talking NAU BYU, and then Arkansas goes and scores 70 points and just destroys everybody.
I know. I mean, I'm sure that's what they're thinking now down there in Fayetteville. Like I think he knows that he has a good team. Like I've been texting the coach the past few months when they got transfer after transfer after transfer, and I was like, wait a minute, you know, because he was talking about they redshirted Gilbert Boyd on purpose last year, right? And I remember talking to the coach, and he didn't want to tell people he was redshirting his best guy because he thought it might look bad. Like he wanted to wait to the end of like, all right, yeah, I'm not doing it, but like he was like, hey, I could redshirt him and we can be really good next year, or I could not redshirt him and we can just be like, hey, we're 16th this year, right? And then 16th next year. Or he's like, no, why not go 30th this year and then potentially be a top 4 next year?
Yeah.
It looks like that's working because they got the new transfers as well.
All right, we'll leave it there. Let us know your thoughts. FloTrack Podcast at gmail.com. Lincoln and I will be back tomorrow to do the last set of rankings, the women's team rankings. Gordon already gave some of them away, but he made them, so he's allowed to do that.
Maybe here, not to change the subject, but maybe we should save the women's team rankings for Monday, because you guys want to preview. You guys can preview the Sunset Tour tomorrow, and then I could help with the women's team rankings because I did them.
Wow, helicopter podcaster here, Gordon Mack, just hovering over, wanting to make sure.
Well, it just makes sense for me. I should probably be involved in the ranking reveal because I know like the rosters. Like,
you don't think
Lincoln's
I know
gonna
the
be
rosters?
like, oh yeah. Lincoln's gonna be like, "Ooh, Walt Drenth, great coach."
Yeah,
you know, like I don't know.
He's in Michigan State does not have anybody back from their title team of 2014. Let's check the record. Okay, so you're doubting Lincoln in this. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you made me go back on my word because I said it several times that we're doing the women's team rankings tomorrow. So, okay, we are no longer in the women's team rankings tomorrow. We have to wait. You have to wait, everybody. You have to wait till Monday because Gordon needs to be there. All right. Thanks to Lon for producing.
Yeah, Gordon needs to be there for the ranking that he created. Yeah.
Actually, though, Monday's kind of – hold on, but Monday's kind of weird. Have you checked your email?
No.
Okay, well, we can talk off pod. It'll be a mystery podcast tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did see that.
So we got to factor that in. So tune in tomorrow. You'll find out what we talk about because there's a lot going on. Anyway, thanks to Lon for producing. We'll talk to you guys later.